Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to another auspicious vlog. Today I'm going to be filming my pregnancy story / journey with baby Nathan. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. My first trimester, I had found out that I was pregnant with Nathan in February of 2018. It was a very exciting time because we were trying for some time and it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. So when it finally happened, we were very thrilled and very excited because we wanted Noah to have a sibling. So the moment that I found out I was pregnant, I ran down to the store and I immediately got prenatal pills and anything that I knew that I needed until I was able to get into my OB. So right from the get-go, I immediately was like, making sure that I was doing everything on my part to make sure that the baby was, gonna be healthy and everything. So my first trimester was good. There was no complications. I had no morning sickness. I wasn't really showing that much, but I didn't think anything of it because with Noah, I didn't start showing until I was the middle of my second trimester. So as time, went on, my bosses would be like, are you sure you're pregnant? Are you sure there's a baby in there? And I'm like, yes, I'm absolutely positive. I have the ultrasounds to prove it. So my size, as far as like my belly, everyone was kind of like, oh, you're very small. And I was just like, yeah, it's how I was with Noah. I didn't really show. I was always small. So I didn't think anything of it. I made it to all my appointments. So up until the middle of my second trimester, there was no problems with his growth. Everything was going well. I did the glucose testing. I did the testing for Down syndrome and everything came back fine. So it just seemed like everything was good. Everything was normal. I'm doing my part. I'm, being healthy. I'm drinking lots of water. I'm, making sure I'm not around anyone who smokes. I personally don't smoke. I made sure I didn't drink, obviously. So I was making sure that I did my part to ensure that my body was healthy to keep the baby healthy. So it was towards the end of my second trimester, actually no, I'm sorry, June. So this was like the beginning of my second trimester. My doctor had referred me to one of our local, it's called Kern Radiology, and they, do x-rays and ultrasounds and everything. So I was referred there for I believe it's called a 2-level ultrasound. I think they had like the more, they had the equipment that my OBGYN didn't have, and they had a better ultrasound system. So they were able to take, I guess, more detailed pictures of everything, and they redid all his measurements and everything. And she sent her patients to do that to make sure that everything was good. So I did that. We got the results back like towards the end of July, and so those measurements had me do towards the end of November. The end of October, close to November. So at that point, my doctor had changed my due date to October 28th, which originally it was October 20th. So it was only like a couple days difference that she changed it. So that was that. They weren't too concerned about his sizing being small because she knew that I was small and everything, so they weren't too, concerned about it. August 20th was, and I'm kind of in between the last like week of my second trimester. That is when my doctor, my OB/GYN, noticed that his legs were measuring a little bit small. And she just said it could just be the way that he was positioned. So we tried to get him to move, but he was just pretty, stubborn. He didn't want to move. He didn't want to do anything. So she said she wasn't concerned at that point. When I went back to my next appointment, she said if she still wasn't able to get good measurements, then she will refer me into a specialist, just to double check and confirm that everything's okay and it's, there's nothing wrong. So when I went back the following month to my doctor, she did the measurements and everything still seemed to be the same as the last time. It was just like a little bit of a growth spurt, not too much. So she was like, you know what, I'm just gonna send you into a specialist just to be safe. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong, but I just want to make sure that, his growth he's not stopping, his growth isn't stopped, basically. So I was like, well, that's fine. I understand, your concerns and everything, so that's fine. She put in the referral, they called me. So then that was in August when I first started seeing the specialist, and his measurements had me due in December, and I just knew there was no way. So he was like, okay, well, then we have a problem here, because if you're this far along, the baby needs to be, this far along in growth and everything, and he's just like way behind. So he wanted to see me once a week, and my doctor also too wanted to see me every 2 weeks. And I wasn't, and honestly, like when I was doing all this with the specialist, like I told him I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned because I'm small. My husband's side of the family, the dad's side, they're, not very tall. My mom's side's not tall. A lot of us are, short. So I wasn't too concerned about it. I just thought, they're just looking way too much into it and just trying to make it a big deal. And, so I just brushed it off. So the second appointment with the specialist, he did all the measurements, and then he compared them from the first time that I was there. And he was like, he's barely even grew, a little bit, and, we're concerned because, at this point he needs to be, again, so many inches and everything. And I'm like, okay, then there's a problem, like what's going on? So then we started talking about different things and, what it could possibly be. But then he said that he, those were just guesses. So he mentioned the dwarfism, he mentioned Down syndrome, and he mentioned a couple other, I think one more other thing that I don't recall. And I remember just sitting there like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? Like what is going on? So I, to hear, I don't know what's happening, or I can't tell you what's going on, it kind of freaked me out, because I was just like, oh gosh, like what's happening? Like what's going on? Like I'm doing everything that I can possibly do to make sure that I'm staying healthy, and, making sure that, I'm staying healthy for him, but, so, and I'm just, like, I don't know, I didn't even know, like, what to think, and I would leave the office, like, crying, and call Mondo, and I'm like, I don't understand what's happening, he's saying this, saying it can be dwarfism, you know, and I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to say. I don't know, you know, I'm at a loss, you know, and, so then we're in September at this point, and my doctor tells me that she advised me to take my leave early. I told her I honestly I wanted to work until my water broke. That meant if my water broke in the office, then so be it. But I wanted to work all the way up until as long as I could. But she didn't think that it would be good for me stress level wise with everything that was going on. The last thing I needed to do was to stress about anything work related. And I just told her, you know what, let me think about it. I'll get back to you on my next appointment. And at this point in September, I was seeing her once a week because she was just wanting to monitor his growth weekly. So I was seeing her once a week, and then I was seeing the specialist once a week. And I remember coming home and telling Mondo, and I'm like, you know, she wants me to take my leave early. She doesn't think that it's healthy for me because she knows that I'm stressing about the situation, and she doesn't think that it's that I'm stressing about the baby, and then I'm stressing, you know, with everyday work life. And I don't know what to do. It's like I really don't want to take my leave, but at the same time, I understand, you know, business is business, and you know, our managers didn't really like us, you know, having personal time off. And I understand it's a business, and you know, you're there to work, and you know, they need people. I totally understand that. So I had decided to and I just, you know, decided last minute when I was there, and I just, you know, because I just thought of everything, and it's just like I didn't want to add more stress to myself, basically. So I decided to take my leave on September the 6th was my last day that I worked. I had all the full intentions on going back after I had the baby and everything. So at this point, I'm seeing the specialist weekly. I'm seeing my doctor weekly. The specialist is still not sure what's going on. You know, his growth was slowly, you know, he's slowly growing, you know, in little spurts. So they were very, very concerned. And at this point, I was just like, okay, this is really serious. This baby is not really growing. Like, what's going on? We spoke to a genetic counselor, and that was just kind of just let us know where they mentioned me terminating the pregnancy just because I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know what to expect, and I honestly didn't feel like that was a solution. I mean, whatever was happening, whatever this child was going to come out to look like, we were going to love him regardless. We were going to love Nathan regardless. And by this time we already had a name. So we were going to love Nathan regardless. And that's what we told them. That we, you know, abortion just wasn't in our cards. We didn't want to do that. And plus it was too late. You know, I'm so far along. It's basically illegal to have an abortion. So just know. They offered me a test to take, but I did not want to take it because they did say that it can result in losing the baby, terminating the pregnancy, and I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that, and like I said, at this point in time, we had already made up our minds that whatever happens, happens. This is happening for a reason. God is in control of this whole situation, you know, so we just figured out, we just, you know, continue with the appointments because what my doctor wants. And it's just, you know, it is what it is, basically. So then by this time, we're already in October. I'm, you know, seeing specialists weekly. I'm seeing my doctor weekly. I was being sent to one of our local hospitals, Memorial Hospital, and I was doing weekly stress tests to make sure that I wasn't overstressing and my stress levels were fine and the baby was fine. So there was just so much going on that I just felt like, I felt really overwhelmed, you know, with just everything. I couldn't believe like this was happening, that there was something wrong in my pregnancy. And I was like, okay, where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong? Like, what happened? After one of my last appointments, I remember coming home and I just fell out, just started crying. I remember just feeling so angry and just so upset, angry at myself because I felt like I did something, terribly wrong during this whole pregnancy. I was so overwhelmed and I didn't know what to do anymore. The fact that, these doctors didn't know what was happening and what was going to happen. And the last thing that the specialist told me was that I needed to prepare myself for the worst. They don't know what to expect. Since I didn't want to do the testing while I was pregnant, they just said that we would have to wait until after the baby was born, to do any kind of testing that they wanted to do, which I was like, okay. So, I come home and, just trying to be positive and trying to think positive, put positive thoughts, just, out to the universe, like, please, I'm praying and everything, and I'm doing everything just to make this as positive as possible. So then October 1st, it was my last appointment with the specialist, and the last appointment with my OB/GYN. I went to my appointment, and again, the measurements, he's still hardly even growing and everything. During the last appointment, the specialist seen that there was a hole in Nathan's heart. He noticed that there was a hole in Nathan's heart and his lungs weren't developing. They were very immature. I think that's the word that they used. So as soon as I left my appointment with the specialist, I drove down to my OB/GYN, and she was like, oh my gosh, like, I tried to call you before you got here. I need you to go to the hospital. And I'm like, wait, what? And then she's like, he didn't tell you? And I'm like, no, he just kind of just sent me off and said, next week we'll, discuss, inducing labor and everything. And she's like, well, I need you to go to the hospital. I already called them. They know you're coming. I need you to go for monitoring. There's a hole in his heart, and you need to get steroids for lung maturity. And then she's like, just go for 2 days and then come back. We made an appointment to go back next week. And she said, we'll discuss inducing labor. Because at this point, I was 38 weeks. And she's like, you're far along enough now to where if he needs to come out before the 40, then we'll just, go ahead and we'll just induce, your labor and everything and just, have him. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. So I called Mondo and I'm like, hey, they need me to go to the hospital. So we actually got home at the same time. I was so scared because I didn't know, you hear hole in the heart and everything, and I'm just like, golly, like what else can happen with this? And it just seemed like before things seemed like they were gonna get better, it's just like one thing after another, and I'm just like, okay, let's just go ahead and go in there 2 days, and and then next week, he'll be here and we'll have a lot more answers, basically. So we had to get Noah situated. We had to get somebody to be here with him, and so we got that all taken care of. Anyway, so I get to the hospital, and I remember the admitting nurse telling me, she's like, okay, how far along are you? And I was like, oh, I just turned, 38 weeks. And she looked at me and she's like, you're really small for 38 weeks. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Basically, I was small with my first one and it just doesn't seem normal, doesn't seem like it's not normal to me, because I just assume it's just a normal thing for my body to do, is not get huge during my pregnancies. So that kind of made me feel like, okay, like then maybe this whole thing, maybe this just isn't normal. What's happening? What's going on here? Everyone has something to say, regarding my size or his size. So it was kind of starting to sink in, but still I was trying to be positive and, trying not to worry. So I was there for the 2 days for, his heart monitoring and the steroids. My doctor came in on the night of October 2nd, and she said to me, I'm going to keep you here. And I was like, what? She was wanting to start inducing my labor the next day, so October 3rd. And I remember telling her, like, my baby shower is this weekend. She's like, okay, well, and I was like, it's fine. We'll have the baby, we'll be home, he'll just be there for his baby shower, no big deal. So the next day, they started me off with Pitocin to kind of, I guess, get my contractions going, if I recall correctly. That didn't work. I was barely even dilating. And, they were like, okay, we have to just, get this going. So then they tried another thing. It's called I don't know if I'm pronouncing this correctly, but it's called Cervidil. So basically it's just this little thin piece of, kind of looked like gauze. They explained it like just a very, very thin tampon, but it was like a little piece of paper basically. And they ended up putting that in between the walls of my cervix, which was very uncomfortable when they were placing it. But they said it would help me, it would get me induced, it would, get everything going. It was for sure to dilate me. So I'm like, okay, do what you gotta do. Let's just get this going. So they put that in there and I had to have that in for, I believe, 24 hours. So this happened on the morning of the 4th. And it didn't work. I was barely even dilated. So then she comes in and she's like, okay, that didn't work, so we need to try something else. And I'm like, can you just let my body just take its course and just let it be? Because I was just already kind of like over it. So the second thing that she tried was called a Foley. I think it's a Foley bulb. So basically it's kind of like this, it has a balloon at the end of it. They, put it inside your woman parts and they put water in it, and it's supposed to expand the cervix and everything. And I had to wear that for 24 hours. That was the most uncomfortable thing. At that point, I literally had it with everything. I was ready to go home. I was so miserable. I was just not having it. I had already been through enough that I didn't want anymore. And I didn't want to think of what else they had to do to me if that didn't work. And it didn't work. I think it got me to like 1.5 centimeters. And she was like, okay, we're just gonna have to break your water and hopefully that, will do it. So I'm like, great. So the morning of, it was very early in the morning, actually no, I'm so sorry. It was late in the evening of October 5th that they came in and said, okay, we're gonna come in and break your water, and then hopefully that'll get everything. So on the night nurse, when she came in to check to see how, if I was dilated anymore, my water ended up breaking right then and there. So I was like, oh, thank God, like they don't have to come and break my water. You know, it did it on its own. So at that point, they gave me more Pitocin to kind of just speed up the contractions and everything. But with that, as my contractions got stronger, Nathan's heartbeat would drop. And that really, really concerned my doctor and the nurses there. So it was decided that I was going to have an emergency C-section. So they notified me. It was about like 7 in the morning. They came to me and they said, this is happening. We need to get this baby out right away because every time your contractions get stronger, his heartbeat is dropping and that's not good. So I was like, oh my gosh, like what, okay, like what else can happen? And I was just scared. I remember I called Mondo because, you know, the people that we had Mondo's cousins here being with Noah, but, you know, we wanted to relieve them, you know, and so I remember Mondo came home that night to get some rest and I called them and I'm like, you know, they want to do a C-section. So and we're not far from the hospital. So he was there pretty fast. The C-section was scheduled for 11 o'clock in the morning, but some mishaps happened and it ended up happening later. And I don't think I've ever been more scared in my life. I didn't know what to expect. I've never had a C-section before. Noah's birth was natural. I had no epidural, nothing. So I was terrified. I was so terrified. I just remember shaking and just feeling so nervous and so scared, and like all I wanted to do was cry. And it was crazy. So they wheeled me down to the room, and then I remember like she says, okay, Dad, you're gonna wait in the waiting room. And I'm like, wait, he cannot come in here with me? And she's like, no, you know, we have to, he can't come in yet. We have to get you prepped and everything. And then once, you know, everything is ready, he can come in. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I started crying like right there. Like, I was like, no, like I need him there. So then I'm in the OR and I'm just like looking around and it's just like, the most craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. I've never been in an operating room. So she's like, okay, you know, sit down. And the doctor's like, have you ever had an epidural? And I'm like, no, I've never had one. And he's like, okay. And he's explaining to me, he's like, don't move, because if you move, then this is going to happen. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, please don't sneeze. I was terrified. And I know that the nurse seen it in my eyes, and she was really sweet. She was very comforting. She's like, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay and everything. And I'm like, oh, okay. So they do the epidural, and at this point, you know, I'm just bare out, and, you know, everyone in the whole, there's like at least 15 people in the room, and everyone is just seeing everything. And I'm like, oh gosh, like this is just not what I imagined, basically. So we end up going through, everything, you know, went well. Had Nathan. All I remember was, you know, them bringing him out. The nurse showed me very briefly and she took him away. And I remember her saying, do you want to come with me or do you want to stay with Mom? And telling Mondo that. And so Mondo ended up staying with me, and then later on, as I was cleaned up and, you know, put in the recovery, he went, you know, immediately into the NICU and seen Nathan. And I mean, I don't really remember much of the recovery. They said that they wheeled me down to see Nathan, and I don't recall that either. Yeah, I don't think I didn't see Nathan until, God, I want to say the next day, and it was like late in the afternoon that I seen him. It was just It was crazy. I didn't expect to see him like all wired up, and you know, there was tubes in his mouth, and it was just something that I didn't expect to see. I just expected to see a little baby, you know, in a little crib, and it was a very big shock to me. And I'm like, are you sure this is, like, in my mind, I didn't say this to the nurse, but in my mind I'm like, is she sure this is the right baby? Like, this is my son, you know? And it was just it was so heartbreaking just to see him like that, and just to know that I couldn't help him. You know, there was nothing I can do you know, to make the situation better. Hey guys, this concludes my pregnancy story. Next week, I will record Nathan's NICU journey. Thank you guys for watching the video. To get a shout out on our next YouTube video, all you have to do is subscribe, turn on post notifications, and comment something positive down below. We're going to roll in this week's shout outs. And remember, you guys are auspicious.